And my country keeps getting in new wars and new places all the time, so I'm working all the time to try to stop those wars.
So there's a lot of books to write.
Right. But I've never had time to write the book.
Well, I think you should write a book because books about the war are written by veterans and some other well-known authors. But I think yours will be a little different.
Yes, yeah, it would be. Well, maybe sometime you and I will end up writing a book together.
Very soon, but not now.
So do you remember how you met Doug?
Well, in 1966, after I finished high school in Hoi An, that's another town in central Vietnam, and now it's a well-known town, Hoi An town.
Hoi An was actually a Portuguese port.
Yes.
What was it called? There was a name. They had a Portuguese name for it before Hoi An.
Haipo.
Haipo. Yeah.
And then
in the 16th century, 17th century, or 16th century.
Early 17th.
Early 17th century.
So how many European neighbors did you have in Vietnam in terms of people who came to explore or
No,
conquer?
they all left until the Chinese and the Japanese remained there, and only now that the Chinese remain there. The Japanese was returned.
And the French got out in 52?
Oh, French is later.
Oh, later.
French
Oh, okay. I see.
Yeah.
So
But now they're only Chinese.
During World War II, Vietnam was occupied by the French, by the Japanese. Was that after the French Vichy government? Do you know?
Yeah, in 46, was for a short period of time with the Japanese.
And Ho Chi Minh and his groups were fighting against both the French and also the Japanese. And when the end of the war came, the Americans, rather than recognizing Ho Chi Minh and an independent Vietnam, because they wanted to support their ally, the French, supported the recolonization of Vietnam by France at the end of World War II, and they remained there until 1954, when they were finally defeated
Dien Bien Phu?
in Dien Bien Phu. And then they left, and then Vietnam was divided. Supposedly it was supposed to be for 2 years, and there was supposed to be elections.
In 1956.
Yeah. 54 to 56. In 56 there were supposed to be elections, which never happened because, as Eisenhower wrote, 80% of the Vietnamese would have voted for Ho Chi Minh. So we actually found Nguyen was studying in upstate New York in a Catholic seminary, and Cardinal Spellman thought he would be an excellent ruler for Vietnam. So we sent him back to be our government in Vietnam, and that was the Vietnamese. Not all the Vietnamese took a liking to this. And in the area of Vietnam where we were, it took me a while to have learned this, but the agreements that ended the French War was that the Viet Minh and Ho Chi Minh's forces were to withdraw north of the what's the parallel? 17th parallel, and the French were to withdraw south of the 17th parallel, and then in 2 years there was to be election over all the country, and it would be united again. It was not a formal division of the country, but we basically encouraged the Catholics to come south. We set up a basically Catholic government, pro-American government in the South. And I didn't realize until much later that many of the people from Tam Kỳ and the Hoi An, the area where we were, they had all been with the resistance movement fighting the French, and they got stuck in the north. So when the election didn't happen and they were betrayed, some of those people started coming back and making acquaintances with people who were back in there. And when I got there in '66, the Americans had lost control of most of Quang Tin province. This was the province that we were in, which is maybe 15 kilometers south of Hoi An.
Yes.
20,
Yeah.
15, 20 kilometers south of Hoi An, and it would be probably 75 kilometers south of Da Nang, maybe a little more.
Yeah, about 70.
Yeah. So in that area, the Americans lost control of all of the western part. They can maintain control of Route 1, which is where they ran their military convoys. And but when I came to Tam Kỳ, they said you can go a kilometer east or a kilometer west, but anything outside of that is NLF territory. You can go north and south on Route 1 as far as you want during the day, but at night, that's also NLF territory. And the only parts that were held were like the towns along Route 1, Hoi An, Quang Tri, Quang Tri, or Tang Bien, little towns along there that they would hold. And as militaries do when they don't control a territory, is they destroy the infrastructure. So basically, they destroyed the infrastructure in the rural parts. So schools had been bombed, marketplaces had been bombed, clinics, anything, any substantial buildings. So the refugees who were in Tam Kỳ, when I got there in '66, had not had schooling for 2 years. And how did we meet? You'll have to remember that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, before I mention this, I would like to talk about a period of time, a very critical one in 1944, 45, 46. Nowadays, Vietnamese historians talk about that, and intellectual people also talk about that. Vietnam, to be concrete, Ho Chi Minh lost a chance to make friends with Americans in 1944.
But he
Because
tried.
Anyhow, that Vietnam missed a chance. That's the term they use.
Yeah.
Because there were American SS forces to help Ho Chi
OSS.
Minh.
Because actually Ho Chi Minh's forces had rescued a bunch of American flyers that had been shot down by the Japanese over Vietnam. And they collaborated with the OSS to rescue the American flyers, give them back to the OSS to smuggle them out. And actually I know that at the end of the war, Ho Chi Minh wrote to, I guess it would have been Eisenhower, asking for recognition. And Vietnam missed that chance, but I think it was not for lack of trying. I think they wanted to be recognized, expected to be recognized, and the interviews that were done with the old OSS people that worked with Ho Chi Minh, they all totally approved. They said, this is a legitimate anti-colonial movement. These are great people. We should work with them. But our paranoia at communism, because Ho Chi Minh was also a communist and allied with Russia and I guess somewhat with China, or at least they had supported him. And it was that fear of communism and also wanting to support our good ally, the French colonialists.
And again, the Vietnamese historians nowadays also talk about another critical period of time. This is the last day of the former Republic of Vietnam, when the communists, they call them revolutionary forces, came over to take this up Vietnam. If right after
75?
yeah, right after the 30th April 1975, and the communists should not so very proud to be a winner, so American could talk with them, but they were so proud, so American didn't want to make friends. That's the second chance that Vietnam missed the opportunity to make friends with America.
And there was
That's
actually
what I said.
there was actually a third chance.
Yeah.
I think during the Carter administration, when they came very close to ending the, after the war ended, the peace treaty said that we were supposed to pay $3 billion to repair the wounds of war in Vietnam. We never admitted to reparations, but we would, out of our beneficence, we would give them $4 billion to heal the wounds of war. Not 1 cent was ever given to Vietnam. And during the Carter administration, there was a period where Carter was, he had given amnesty to the Americans who had fled, and he was trying to heal things. We were pushing very hard to get a normalization to end the embargo. They also, not only did they not give any aid that they had promised, but they also did an economic embargo, which meant that no American commerce or trade or aid, and also no IMF or World Bank loans. All of that was completely cut, and we also tried to prohibit trade from Western Europe. I think France continued some trade and some of the West, but we really hurt them very badly, and we came very, very close to it, and I don't know exactly what happened, but they were so close, and then it just, the politics changed or something, and they felt like they couldn't do it, and it went on for, another 15 years or something.
But very recently, again, Vietnamese historians and intellectual people expressed their displeasure with the leaders, the communist leaders, that they could not win the American heart so that they could join WTO right at the same time or even before the Chinese did.
Yeah.
That's we lost a chance to do business with America. That is what they blame the leader now.
And I think that criticism is probably valid. They could have done more.
Yeah.
But I can tell you that Vietnam was more open to America than any other country that we've ever fought with.
I believe that.
They had a Vietnamese, Hoi Viet Mi, the Vietnamese American Friendship Society that was established in Hanoi in the first Americans traveled there in like 64, 65, just as the American troops were. But I visited there in 1970 with a student delegation at the invitation of the Viet Mi, the Vietnamese American Association, and the Hanoi Student Union. When you think about it, here is a country that's being bombed by our country, and they are inviting citizens, students, and anti-war activists to come to their country, and we were welcomed as friends and treated as guests. And actually in 1970, Hanoi was being bombed while we were there, and there was an air raid that happened while I was in Hanoi, and we all had to run to the bomb shelters and wait until the planes were gone. But I don't know of any other situation in history where a country has tried so hard to reach out. But I'm sure there is more, and and I'm sure that there probably was some pride that we defeated the most powerful nation on earth. But actually there is a Vietnamese saying that when your enemy is defeated, you build a golden bridge to help him
Set them up.
Yes. So that's very deep in their culture. And it's interesting to me now that they're criticizing themselves for not having worked harder to have done that, because they certainly have did more than Americans have ever done in that way. But that understanding, I mean, that's kind of what nonviolence is all about, is an understanding that, you know, you have to reach out to your enemies. You have to try to understand them. You have to give them the benefit of the doubt, and that it is through making friends with your enemies that you actually defeat the war and the enmity for all of us.
But in Vietnam, we believe that we can understand that situation because the hardliners in the political bureau still the powerful one.
Yeah. Well, maybe we should go back and talk about
Sure.
the early. When did we first meet? I don't even
Well, summer of '66.
Yeah.
All right. You were 22 years old. How old were you?
17. Well, just a little thing about the American Vietnamese Association. This is what Vietnamese people nowadays see the difference between two different types of Vietnamese American Association. Before 1935, in the South Vietnam, we had VAA, Vietnamese American Association. This was a very, very prestigious one. They did organize English classes, but they had other activities to help scholars and to help students in general.
That would have been funded by AID, Agency for International Development.
I don't know, but that is VAA.
Right, that's different than the
Yeah.
North Vietnamese.
After 1995, I don't know when, but they started to set up a new association called Vietnam United States Organization, VUS. Yeah.
Oh.
That VUS, and it's not a precious one because it's run by overseas Vietnamese mainly. They come back and run and they do business. That's what. Just open English school at any level, and well, their focus is money rather than education. That's why the practice of VUS is not so high in the VAA. But in fact, there was VUS committee in Hanoi, the highest rank of the type, and at that level, they don't do business, but at low level in Saigon, in Hanoi, just opening school in English. Yeah, and they compete each other. Yeah, and in 1966, in fact, the army of Vietnam could control the National Highway 1 only. Yeah, and American also helped them to protect the road. And that's why people, South Vietnamese people living in the towns area or along National Highway did not know much about war. Only people from mountainous area or the west side mainly of National Highway 1. So they had to leave their villages to move into anywhere close to National Highway 1, especially in towns, provincial towns or capitals, where they can get protection and help, food and some education. That's why they had refugee villages in Tam Kỳ where Dirk, Bill Herod and other social workers from the States, and they work for VNC, Vietnam Christian Services, where I joined them.
Now the reason why the refugees came in was because we were bombing those areas. And actually, they couldn't even get everybody to move because of the bombing, because a lot of people would just dig underground bomb shelters and stay underground at night or when the planes were flying over. And I remember talking to guys at the AID, the military advisors, and MACV, and they said, we can't figure out how the rice keeps coming up in these. We moved all the people out of this valley 2 years ago, and the rice keeps coming up. Because people were actually living underground. So then finally, they just went and defoliated the area, and so like every living thing was killed. And so the people would, if they had peanuts or sweet potatoes that were already partially developed, you could dig those up. They were still good. The rice was completely destroyed, and nothing would grow after that. And so as soon as they had eaten up whatever this was underground, they had to come in. So people were literally forced, and it was part of the U.S. strategy to separate the fish from the water, because the guerrillas in guerrilla warfare are fish that swim among the water, and the water is the people, and they get their support from the people. So the theory was, well, if we're going to win this war, we basically have to get rid of all the people. So they forced all of those people out of the areas that they couldn't control militarily, moved them into the areas that they could control militarily, and put them in refugee camps, or sometimes new life development camps, which were almost like concentration camps. Similar to what we're doing in Iraq now, with Fallujah and places like that, where you destroy everything, then you bring people back in a tightly controlled, militarized space where you can control who goes in and out.
In fact, the situation there then was very complicated. On daytime, we had bombing from cannons.
Yeah, artillery.
25 kilometers from National Highway 1.
Yeah.
Shot to the west side, so people have to live under bunkers. Yeah. And
were you originally?
I spent some time, not all the time, but some of that back home, and then I had to stay under the ground in the bunkers with my parents. And
because his home was actually out in the western area.
The shield noise from cannons.
They were artillery, 105 and 155 howitzers.
155, yes. Even the biggest one, 201 or something, came over, and we heard the shield, and then, boom, explosion. So we did not think that we may survive, but then, anyhow, the bunker was safe. And in fact, young people, part of them moved into the mountainous area to join the guerrilla force. Some of them moved to the town with their older people, but mainly older people remained there. And the South Vietnamese government established another fort they call rural establishment, rural stabilization to gain the land back. Yeah, they wear a black uniform, and they were equipped with not M16 rifle, the older one, carbine.
The M1 carbine.
Yeah. And they could work for a while, but they could not gain the land back from the other side. Yeah.
So, tell me what you remember of when we first met and how you got involved with our program.
Yeah, in fact, I visited a pastor's family, Pastor Tang, in Sa Vương Lai. That's also a refugee area.
Yeah, refugee camp.
And Pastor Khan was a man with 10 or 11 children. And his children was a student. In fact, I began teaching after graduating from high school. So one of his children, the oldest one, who is a pastor now in Ohio, was sick, or was 8th graders in my class or something. But I met and another American biohazard. And in fact, myself did not know anything about their activity. I just got aware that they were social workers, they were university students or university graduates. They come over here to work without salary. That's just something strange to my mind. Why? And in fact, they helped the refugee people mainly, gave them food, taught them how to do craft, bamboo wares, wooden wares.
We had a bamboo crafts project that
Very successful.
we had about 50 families, or not quite that many.
But this, I can tell you how it was successful. Every weekend we carry on the bamboo glassy,
mugs,
bamboo kettle, everything in bamboo.
Water pipes.
To Tulai American Air Base
Yes.
to sell. And when he left, the refugee people collected money, make a gold hand bracelets.
Yeah.
And I think it's 3 ounce or something to give him, but he did not receive accept it. But well, you see, very successful for them. Yeah.
And we had about 50 families, I think, that supported themselves. And
Yeah.
there was also, when the Portuguese missionaries came in the 16th century, they not only came to convert their souls, but they also came to convert their language. So actually, an early missionary changed the writing in Vietnam from the old Chunyao, which is kind of it's a Chinese Vietnamese script, to westernized, Romanized.
In 1920,
such to do with
is the first time they nationalized that language, Romanized language, as national language.
And so now you can type Vietnamese on a typewriter, but you have to have some diacritical marks because it's tonal.
Yeah.
But all of the letters and then the diacritical marks, and you can get everything. So we would write on our water pipes and and desk sets and mugs in the old script, the Chinese script, peace in Vietnam, on these things that we would sell to the GIs. At the PX in Chulai, there was the big Marine base about 25 kilometers south of us, and so we would load up all of these things and take them down and sell them to support 50 families, and also to covertly get our message of peace to the GIs that were there. And nobody ever had it translated, because most Vietnamese can't even read those anymore. Only kind of the literature majors, or like the priests or people that study all of the ancient texts are, of course, in that Chinese style language. And one of the tragedies is that it made it easier for them to use computers and all of this, but it also cut most Vietnamese off from their history. Everything that was, and there's incredible epic poems and literature and stuff from,
That's
1,000 years ago.
Very true, very true. And nowadays in Vietnam, I myself cannot read or understand it. My parents or my oldest brother can, but not me. And that's a big disadvantage for us, because literatures, the well-known one, were written in Chinese characters. And, some translation, but it's not the best one. And Chinese Vietnamese language is no longer taught nowadays.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure in the universities probably
Few classes.
philosophy or
but written
literature?
in Romanized alphabet.
Really.
Yeah.
So anyhow, that was our little bit of covert sabotage of the U.S. military. Also, we sold water pipes. Probably not something that Vietnam Christian Service was aware of, but they have in Vietnam an herb. It's called thuốc lào, which is actually the Vietnamese credit with this is at least some of the guerrillas used to say this is why they won the war, was because of Thuốc Lao. Because Thuốc Lao, this herb, it literally translated it would be Laotian herb, but it's kind of like a tobacco, and we would always give a little sample of it with our water pipe kits, which were quite popular. But when you smoke it, it gives you an immediate high relaxation, but it's gone in like 15 minutes. I mean, it's amazing. And they said, you could be going through the jungles, dodging American bombs, and you're really exhausted. You stop and you pull out your water pipe and you smoke you do your took of Thuốc Lao, totally relaxed for 15 minutes, and then after that you are ready to go off. And the Americans who would get high on opium or marijuana or something else that leave you totally stoned and addicted, that would ruin them. But the Vietnamese with their Thuốc Lao.
That's true. In fact, Southern or Central people don't smoke Thuốc Lao, but we can feel that it causes them relax or feel confident or courageous in some way, because if you see them smoke, you can realize it.
And actually, I had brought back, I was on one of my trips to Hanoi, I brought back actually a very nice silver water pipe and a little stash of Thuốc Lao. And I kind of forgotten that it was in my luggage. And I came back through customs, and the guy goes through and he finds this and he pulls this out and he says, "What is this?" And you could just see his eyes lighting up. And I said, "Oh, it's tobacco." And he smelled it and he tasted it, and it, it's not at all. It tastes close. The taste is much closer to tobacco than it would be to marijuana. He says, "Oh, you're right. Let it go." So it came through U.S. Customs.
Well, that also symbol of Hanoian or Northern Vietnamese. And nowadays, if you visit Hanoi, this sign is so familiar and so interesting. Some young people with mobile phone, new one, and very elegant, sitting, drink a cup of tea on the roadside and on the pavement with a long pile of Thuốc Lao. We cannot do that, but that's a symbol of Hanoi.
Yeah.
Symbol, yeah.
But Nguyen not only worked in our bamboo crafts cooperative, but also in our literacy project. That was probably the most successful and most important thing that I did while I was there.
Yeah, that's the most successful, and young people later felt grateful, most grateful, because they got education. Yeah. But anyhow, in late 1934, there was school manager, so-called, didn't do well, and they were blamed of some Vietnamese partner, not American. They did not distribute the fund equally to the beneficiaries there, and that's why.
This was in my program afterwards in '75, or is this some
late 1974.
Who was the American that was there then?
No, that is Yoshihiro Ichikawa. But
he was a Japanese man.
But in fact he was wrongly blamed. But anyhow, there was a few wrongdoings in it. Not him, but
right.
the Vietnamese. Another guy, not Boo, but someone in some villages. For example, they receive funds from your organization to buy notebooks to distribute to the students, but they didn't spend all the money for that. And then it was Richard Fuller who blamed Yoshihiro because Yoshihiro did not do his duty well. That's what he mentioned.
Oversight of keeping track of it.
But it was very successful.
And he's now actually, this is a Japanese Mennonite who worked in Tam Kỳ for a period of time,
Yeah, yeah.
and now is actually back in Hanoi teaching Japanese
Yeah,
at the university in Hanoi
yeah.
under MCC again.
Yeah. Only in his office in Hanoi, I heard through another friend, I did not hear from him directly, that he and his wife are the two true Mennonite people there. There are two other American, but they were students who came to learn Vietnamese or something.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, we still have actually Americans teaching English
Yeah.
in Vietnam today. It's one of the programs that we do. I think there's also an agricultural program, and now teaching Japanese as well. But let's talk more about those, the 66, 67 era when we were there. I mean, I remember being astounded. And I was the first Mennonite sent to this area, and they said, go and find out what the people want, and then do it. And I was astounded to learn that what they wanted most was for their kids to learn to read and write their own language. I mean, it was just mind-boggling. And then I needed students to teach because I realized I couldn't teach. So I used all Vietnamese high school students. And at the height of the program, by the time I left, I think I had almost 90 students involved in the program. They were, I think we only gave you like $10 a month.
Yeah.
But they, and in some of the classes, some of the classrooms, we were doing four different classes in one classroom. If you had too many students, you would do the first 2 hours of the morning for one class, they would go, then another class would come in the second 2 hours of the morning, first 2 hours in the afternoon, second 2 hours. So you were doing, you know, if he had, you know, 25 students or 30 students in a class, he would be doing 4 times that many. And we ended up with something like between 3,000 and 4,000 students who literally learned to read and write through our program. And when they came into the Vietnamese government program in like the second grade or something like this, they were usually ahead of kids who had gone through the first grade in the government schools.
Yeah, that they were, in fact, we did our jobs well seriously.
Yeah.
That's why the people there study harder and higher quality than the government school pupils. In fact, Vietnamese people who work for VNCS did not think about salary or anything. We were surprised they work for nothing. That's why we enjoy working with them and for the refugee people. That's why we did not, well, they gave us some, or if they didn't, it's okay. We didn't feel necessary about, even though, but another reason, we were young then. So we did not have many thing to spend or to have just energy and enthusiasm. But in fact, one thing that Doug and some other Americans did not know then, that the local government, the South Vietnamese government authority did not like them very much. The reason is that they thought, oh, these people might work for the CIA to act against the Vietnamese government, South Vietnamese government against them, or not to support them or anything, or maybe they supported the communists or something. So in fact, he did not know that, but I or other Vietnamese, my brother is got aware of that. And even Pastor Kang was not very much supportive to you. Yeah, he said to me, "Oh, Doug is okay, everything is good, but he's a pro-communist." Pastor Kang told me a few times. That's what he said. And I did not say anything. I didn't know it was true or not. But then again, this is also something new. After 1975, people who work for VNCS people in Tam Kỳ or in Quang Nga, people like him, was suspicious by the new government, the communists. They are more suspicious about us. Suspicious. They say, well, you working for American, for CIA or something. I myself did not know anything about CIA then, but well, we just told them true. Well, we work for them as social workers, and they did not pay out as salary or anything. We just work to help poor people. I did not say refugee people because that concept is something taboo to them. And well, I know that they don't believe what I say, and up to now they still don't believe it. Maybe top people or in their department are aware of true, but not me. You know? Yeah. So even now, if he come back, so in public they say, "Oh, welcome back," but they will follow you. I'm sure. Yeah.
Did I ever tell you that I went back in 1980?
Yeah, I heard. Just you mentioned that, and you stopped by the G school or something. Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually with a medical delegation that was taking medicines to the Bach Mai Hospital in Hanoi that had been destroyed by American bombing by Nixon in the Christmas bombings of '72. And so we helped to rebuild the ear, nose, throat hospital, but we also had helped to rebuild a clinic in My Lai, where the massacre had, what the Americans called My Lai. And so we were on our way from the north to go to My Lai, and I had become, because I speak Vietnamese, I had become good friends with our guide, interpreter, minder, the guy from the Viet Minh who was responsible for our delegation. I said, I used to live and work in Tam Kỳ. I said, I would love to, just stop and see if I could find any of my old friends. And he said, we're supposed to go on down, but he said, I'll give you 15 minutes, 20 minutes in Tam Kỳ. We'll just stop, it'll be quick. And Route 1 goes right through Tam Kỳ, so we had to actually go through Tam Kỳ to get from Da Nang, where he'd flown to Da Nang, and then we were going down to My Lai. So we pulled into the old house that I used to live in, and that was changed. The woman was gone, and so I went to the school and asked for the caretaker, and the caretaker wasn't there. So I told the kids that go tell Ông Ba Ang that Nguyen Van Muoi from the United States has come to visit them. So they ran to the marketplace and they told people, and everybody who knew me came. So there's this mass of people. And I had my Polaroid camera, and I was standing there with them, and we were getting pictures taken and getting all the gossip of what happened, who married who, and all this kind of stuff. And I looked over, and I saw my guide over in our van with a couple of other Americans, and they were beckoning me to come over because it was a huge group of people, and I thought, they're worried about me because I was in the middle of 75 Vietnamese, and people were jumping all around and everything, and they're probably really worried, and they don't realize these are all my friends. So I just kind of ignored them for a while, and then I noticed the beckoning was getting more frantic. So I finally went over there, and the Catholic high school that I had lived in before I'd moved to the house, which was now a Vietnamese military base. The commander of the base looked out on Tranquillon Street and saw 75 people out in front of there and wanted to know what in the world was coming on, and he came to ask, and my guide, who had always, this was a high-level official from the Viet Minh, and he could just swing his way, any roadblock, any government official, he'd just show his papers and we would zip through. And this commander came out and said, I want to see your your travel papers. He pulls out his travel papers very sheepishly, and it says we're supposed to be in Quang Ngai, My Lai, which is about 50 kilometers south of there. And everybody said, you know, he had to talk fast to convince them that actually we weren't CIA agents and that we really were friends of the Vietnamese people. But it was an amazing kind of meeting of a lot of our old friends there, although it did not end quite well.
In fact, what VNC people like, including me, was wonderful why, and we did help the people, mainly the refugee people from the countryside, and local people in the town, so about education mainly. And this is my own idea. If they're having more people like VNCS throughout the South Vietnam, and the U.S. government listen to them more, they learn more about Vietnam, Vietnamese culture, that they learn about when they had real experience about Vietnam culture. And in fact, it was something ignored by the American governments. They did not know much about our culture. In fact, Vietnamese people are different from American. I can say that we are more patient than Americans. More patient. Wives can wait for husband for 20 years to come back. That's true. That's something you've never believe. And
my wife gets upset when I'm gone for 3 weeks.
yeah, I remember many GI got digital letters just after 6 months. Yeah, they showed me, and that the first time I learned the phrase digital letter. Yeah, I didn't know what it was, but then they explained to me. And in fact, the influence of VNCS was great, but I don't think that the U.S. government listened to them. Another thing relating to this is that a book about the war that I read, the book A Bright Shining Light by John Paul Van, by who? That's a famous author. A Bright Shining Light.
Yeah.
Yeah. The author is very well known. His name just 2 words.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, but one main character is John Paul Van, a general. Now he was a civilian official.
He was CIA, wasn't he?
I don't know, probably so. I don't know. But then he was nominated to Central Highland Vietnam as a 1-star general or something, and that book, only that general got aware of the Vietnamese cultures, and he said if the American top brass also got aware of the culture or things like his, the situation would have been different. Yeah, and I myself read that book and I realized several comments from the author, from the characters in the books were correct. Yeah, A Bright Shining Light. Yeah, and I met the author in Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he took a cruise ship. Yeah, and I was working as a tour guide sometime when they did not have enough guides. So I was asked to work a tour guide, and in fact to translate for them secretly. And once in 1993, I think so, or 89, when Robert Gates, he's
CIA.
Yeah, he was a retired from CIA then, but he traveled on a cruise ship. And the Vietnamese authority got aware of that, and they asked me to work as just a guide. But beside me there was a high-ranking police, and he asked me to talk to him. And well, before the meeting, I thought this big guy, American, big guy. No, he's not a big one. Rubber Gay, not a big one. And then we talk about nonsense things, and then later the police asked me what he said and was his director of CIA. I said, well, I did not ask him. But that's the way they did tourism then. Now it's more liberal now. Yeah, but I mean, they suspect everything. Yeah, everything American. But at the same time, they wanted everything American. Yeah, and in the political bureau member now, there are 14 members, 30 or 15, 14, and then one alternative member, so 15. And the hardliners, hardliners, and the open ones, maybe balanced now, maybe balanced, yeah. So those members from the south and the central open it, but from the north hardliners. Yeah.
Talk a little bit about what it was like. I mean, you left Tam Kỳ, what, in 67 or 68 to go to Hue, to the university?
Yeah. In the 1968, just after the Tet Offensive,
yeah.
but they call it Tet Uprising. They call it Tet Uprising. You call it Tet Offensive. All young people at 18 years old must join the army if they are not college students. So I had to join the university officially. Before that, I was a distant student, so not regular one. So then I had to come to Hue to study. In fact, Hue and Tam Kỳ about 170 or 150 kilometers, about 100 miles or so. So it's not far. But the way, the travel between two cities, Tam Kỳ and Hue, is sometimes very dangerous, because the communists could come over the control bridge if the Americans were not there. So I studied.
And there's high mountains between Da Nang and Hue.
Yeah, that is
a
the
high mountain pass.
Yeah, they call it a cloudy pass.
Yeah.
You can see clouds, and clouds cover everything there on the top. So that they call it a cloudy pass.
What's it called in Vietnamese?
Hai Van, đèo Hai Van.
Hai Van. Yeah.
Hai Van, Hai water, Van Muoi is cloud. You can see cloud close to the seawater. That's why it's named. And in Hue, I also worked just a few weeks for VNCS, and after that they closed the office. Yeah, it was so dangerous there. And until 1970s, I graduated. Yeah. In fact, I graduated from some kind of intensive course, just 2 years. But then later, I could legalize it as a 4-year graduate with some certificate I studied separately before that. That I often do it. But then I come back to Tam Kỳ and work for VNCS again, mainly in the summer, mainly during the school year, just part time.
So who was there then?
Then is that Morris Byrne?
Oh, Maurice. Yeah.
Morris Byrne. He's in Kentucky now.
Yeah.
And then, but you know that at the beginning of 1975, I was drafted again, and I had to join the Urban Officer School for just 3 months. But after that, I was sent back to school. Doctors and teachers enjoy some privileges. So after training, was sent back to school and hospital to work. But I remained in Saigon for 3 months to work for Bill Harrod. Because I like to stay in Saigon for a while. And he was director, assistant or something then, of VNCS in Saigon.
Really? Yeah. I didn't realize that.
Just 1 year or half a year, but I worked for him. And Bill Harrod was also the first member of VNCS in Turkey with us. But then he got out of Vietnam or Saigon, but then he came back in
Yeah.
71. Yeah.
Wow, that's some. Listen, we have about 5 minutes of tape left. Is there anything, any story that you thought about during the last 45 minutes or so that you wanted to talk about?
Well, again, VNC activities were very, very important, and VNC was a successful program. But I feel regretful that the U.S. government did not know much or did not care much about the activity. If they had, so they learned more. Yeah,
That's important.
Yeah.
That's very important.
Yeah, similar to the book Bright Shining Light,
Yeah.
some part that's especially the truth.
I'm going to get that, by the way.
Yeah. It was translated in Vietnamese
Oh.
already. And another book about a brother in arms by a veteran, a Marine veteran, William Broynes, that I translated into Vietnamese because it was very real from the Vietnamese side, not from America. I don't know what American side the book was correct, but the Vietnamese. That's why I enjoyed so much. I translated it, even though it was difficult, and published in 1988. It was a strange thing then. An American book translated into Vietnamese and published. But I don't know whether nowadays Mennonite activities in Vietnam is more successful than VNCS in the old day or not. I'm not sure because it is mainly in Hanoi.
Well, they also are they're in a university south of in the Delta.
Oh yeah. But in fact, this is an important factor that influences everything. Even though they are all communist leaders at provincial level, but if they are from the north, so they are very patronizing. Yeah, their language, their action, everything. But if they are central or South Vietnamese, more liberal. That's very true.
Interesting.
And I think any Western company, Western organization or government work, I think, more successful with Central or South Vietnamese communists, leaders. I don't know, probably in the North they feel that they are number one in everything.
Just like Northerners in this country also tend to think that they're the center of the universe. And
Now, wait, we're
those
not
of us
supposed to
from the
criticize.
South are much
I mean,
more
we're supposed to be
loose.
free, but you can't do that.